Well, welcome everybody to our discussion about a career in transportation. Before we dive into the presentation, I'd like to start with some introductions. First, I'm Mark Vandehei. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I actually started my career with Kittleson and Associates way back in 1987. I started right out of school with an undergraduate degree in civil engineering. And at the time, there was only 3 employees in the firm. So we were a very young firm at the time, very different situation back then. I spent a couple of years working in Portland, Oregon, which was where the company was founded. And then I decided to go back and get a master's degree at UC Berkeley. And so I spent a little bit of time down at Berkeley and got my master's degree in transportation, and then came back to Portland and picked up my career in transportation. Over the course of my career, I've really done a very wide range of things in the field of transportation, but have tended to focus more in the areas of traffic operations and long-range transportation planning. While at Berkeley, I got really interested in transportation research as well. And when I came back to the firm, we were just getting involved in national research work. And so I let Wayne Kittleson, our founder, know that I was really interested in trying to continue a career path in research as well if I could. And so he connected me with the Transportation Research Board, and little by little, I developed my way into some TRB committees, and we began to pursue some research projects. And I worked on a wide variety of transportation research projects over the years and tended to specialize in the areas of traffic flow theory, traffic operations, and highway capacity. And I was very active in the Strategic Highway Research Program about 10 years ago. And so that was kind of my connection to research. It was probably around the mid-90s I started taking on a little bit more corporate and business management responsibility as the company was beginning to expand geographically. By 1998, we'd have a couple of offices on the East Coast, and Wayne Kittleson decided that he would benefit from some help on the management side. And so I was appointed to a role of chief operating officer for the firm, and I served in that capacity while we continued to grow and expand into the 2000s until around the end of 2009, when Wayne decided to step out of the role of president and CEO, and I was nominated by our board to succeed Wayne. So I've been in the president and CEO role ever since 2010. And now I'm actively in transition mode myself, and am planning to step out of the CEO role at the end of next year, 2019. And so January 2020, we will transition to our next firm CEO, which is Brandon Nevers, who actually presented at the webinar last week. So that's a little bit about my background, a 30-year career summary in less than 5 minutes. So let me turn it over to Jennifer Musselman to describe a little bit about her background.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I went to the University of Virginia and got my undergraduate degree in civil engineering there. While there, I had the opportunity to intern with Kittleson after my sophomore year, and also did an internship with VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, after my junior year, which was a really great opportunity to compare both the public and private sectors. Ultimately decided that I wanted to work in the private sector and consulting, and with Kittleson in particular. So I joined the firm full-time in 2014, originally in the Orlando office. So I worked there for about a year and a half. Orlando is one of our larger offices, about 25 or so folks. So got a really good mix of experiences in engineering and planning there, and really grew to like the planning side of the work that we did. So I moved to Tampa, where I live now, about 3 years ago, and since living here, have focused really on that planning work, so on complete streets and bicycle, pedestrian, and transit planning, trying to put those more vulnerable modes on the same pedestal as vehicles when we're making decisions about how to use our roadway space. So that's where I spend a lot of my time now, and also help with the internship program through hiring and recruiting and webinars and things like this, and then also have helped facilitate the internship program over the summer for the past couple of years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kylie.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Hey everyone, my name is Kylie Cavanis, and I'm an engineering associate here at Kittleson in our Reston, Virginia office. I started working here in August 2016 after graduating with my bachelor's degree in engineering from James Madison University. I was exposed to transportation my junior and senior year of college through my capstone project, and that project consisted of planning and designing the location of a greenway system to improve bike ped access in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And so since working at Kittleson, most of my work has consisted of operations and alternatives analysis, as well as conceptual design, though I do work on planning projects as well, and similarly to Jen, very much enjoy it. Most recently, I've been working a good bit on roundabout design, and then I also just got involved with the intern selection team and help host these webinars. So that's a little bit about me. I just want to take the time to share a few housekeeping items before we get started. After the presentation portion of the webinar, we'll take some time to answer your questions. So feel free to enter questions into the chat box at any time during the presentation, and we'll try to get to as many as we can afterwards. Throughout the presentation, we'll also have a few poll questions, and we'll go ahead and get started with two of those right now. So the first one is, did you hear about this webinar? And we have as options the university/professor/TA, Kittleson website, social media, a friend, or other, if we can't get you with those options. And I'll just take a few more seconds to collect our responses. Okay, so it looks like most of you have heard about our webinar through your university and professor, so that's great. I have one more, and the second question is, what do you hope to learn most from this webinar? And we have as options the transportation industry, pursuing a career in transportation, our core values, the work we do, and our approach to hiring and internships. And I'll just take a few more seconds. All right. It looks like most of you are interested in learning about pursuing a career in transportation. So that's great. We'll get to that, as well as our approach to hiring, internships, and the transportation industry mostly. So with that, I will let Mark get back to it.
All right. Thanks, Kylie. So we're going to cover a variety of topics here in our presentation. I'm going to start with an overview about transportation in general and some of the aspects that particularly get me excited about the field. We're also going to dive into a discussion about career opportunities with our firm and our internship program, and then we're going to talk about some project examples that we do here in our firm. Actually, the most important thing, though, while we certainly are trying to highlight some opportunities to work with us and perhaps participate in our internship program, our number one objective is really to get you interested in the field of transportation if you're not, and if you are interested in transportation, give you some advice or some things to think about as you begin to pursue career opportunities in transportation. So we view this as primarily an educational opportunity for all of you, and an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the field and more about potential career opportunities in the consulting field of transportation. And a byproduct of that is we may generate some interest in our firm. So any of these are successful outcomes from our perspective. So let's talk first a little bit about transportation connections. So suffice it to say, transportation impacts each and every one of us in our daily lives. What got me most interested in transportation early in my career at the university was it was something that I could really relate to personally. It was something that I knew my friends and family could relate to, and I knew that at the end of the day, I'd have the opportunity to have a meaningful impact in the community that I work in. And I think as professionals, that's something that many of us strive for. But transportation in particular it plays such an important aspect in our society. And if you think about it, odds are each and every one of you have experienced the transportation system in one way or another today, unless you've been at home all day. So to get to school, to get to a job, one way or another, you had to use one of our modes of transportation. Everything we buy at the grocery store and our retail stores involves some sort of a transportation connection. Every product that we get nowadays on Amazon, at the end of the day, is going to have to use the transportation system to be able to make its way to us. So no matter where we go, no matter what mode we choose, transportation is going to play an important role in really keeping us connected to our communities and the people in the world around us. So transportation is something that really does involve all modes. Oftentimes, people tend to think about a singular mode like the auto mode, which is what many people connect transportation to most closely. But transportation is really about a wealth of modes of transportation, including air, water, land travel, all forms of public transportation, shipping. There's just a wide range of things, and transportation really connects to many aspects of our economy. And as transportation professionals, we're involved in long-range planning, we're involved in designing systems, we're involved in helping with manufacturing aspects of transportation. There's construction elements of transportation. I talked a little bit about the operational aspects of transportation. That was really my passion and interest, which is how do I make the transportation system work better on a day-to-day basis? And there's a really important maintenance component of transportation. So all of these are aspects that define transportation as a whole, and each and every one of those could create a path towards a potential career opportunity in transportation. And as I said before, it's not just about cars. This is something that I think historically transportation engineers and professionals tend to think of. I know early on in my career, I would admit that the vast majority of the work that we did as an organization tended to focus on the auto mode. But fast forward to today, there's a real renaissance in the use of alternative modes, particularly the walking and biking mode. And you can see in this graph the funding level at the federal level for pedestrian and bicycle facility programs. And there's just an enormous amount of work going on in the pedestrian and bicycle arena. When I first started working in Portland, Oregon, back in 1987, there really were just a handful of people that were walking and biking into downtown. We've always had a pretty strong transit share. Portland's always been a leader in the transit arena, but not a lot of people walked and biked into downtown. Well, now one of our bridges carries more than 10,000 bikes a day coming into downtown Portland. and it's growing year over year. We really can't even keep up with the growth rate in terms of bicycling, and then a large number of people walk to work as well. So Portland and many other communities around the country have put a big emphasis on improving the pedestrian and bicycle modes. But of course, transit plays an incredibly important role, particularly for large urban areas, and helping particularly for those that are more disadvantaged economically in our society, to be able to get to work, to be able to get to other places that may not be able to afford a private automobile. And of course, I talked about all the many other modes of transportation, so it really is quite all-encompassing. Transportation is also an incredibly important aspect in driving the economy. Statistic that really resonated with me many years ago when I was thinking about getting into transportation is that transportation, this was at the time, and I don't think this statistic has changed all that much, accounts for something like 40% of the gross domestic product of the United States. So it's an amazingly important driver of our economy. And there's many, many examples of how investments in transportation have driven the economic development of particular communities or sectors of communities. Again, back to a Portland example, we've been actively involved over many years in redeveloping an industrial component of our waterfront. And the major catalyst, the first thing that was done as part of the planning aspect of that project of how to revitalize a brownfield, was what to do about transportation. And the city really got in front of it and made a major investment in streetcar and light rail and the pedestrian and bicycle connections to that area. Fast forward to today, there's been several $100 million of economic development that has occurred in that region or in that particular area. And I really believe, and the business leaders would agree with this, that the transportation investments played a really critical role in stimulating that aspect of the economy. So transportation is a really important aspect of driving the economy of most sectors. And in fact, if you talk to most jurisdictions, transportation ranks usually in the top 3 issues relative to it's either crime, education, or transportation. It's usually one of those that's in the top 3 of the most important issues of communities. Transportation also plays a very important part in family spending. You can see these statistics here. Transportation next to housing is typically the highest expenditure of family spending on an annual basis. And whether it's for the private auto mode or even for public transportation, it usually is a major driver. Now, we're beginning to see a shift in this, and I suspect this statistic may change a little bit over time. And again, I'm reflecting on the Portland experience, where many of the staff that work with us here in Portland, many of them don't own a car and will walk and bike to work. So they've made some personal life choices that are driving down their transportation costs. Now, this may change as they begin to have families and are really needing to rely on other forms of transportation to move their families around. But regardless, transportation, I suspect, is going to continue to be a very significant component of family spending on an annual basis. So let's talk about some of the challenges. I really love the time that we're in transportation. While I have always enjoyed my career and have always been challenged, I've been waiting for this time when being a transportation engineer would be cool, and I think it's finally arrived. So now my wife may disagree with this, but I really think now is the time to be a transportation professional, because it really is becoming a very important topic that is coming up again and again in the news, and just thinking about the number of industries that are making major investments in transportation, from Google to Verizon to AT&T. Of course, you've all heard about Uber and Lyft. But the entire tech sector has got a very strong focus in transportation in ways that we haven't seen up until recent years. So we do have a number of challenges in front of us, and I think it's a really exciting time to be able to be entering the field of transportation, because things are changing so quickly. The way people are using the transportation, the challenges that agencies are facing in running the transportation system are really significant. And so some of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about in the next few slides revolve around complete streets, connected and automated vehicles, which you've probably heard something about, in smart cities. So complete streets is an area of practice that we are very heavily involved in as an organization. And this is a focus of many agencies around the country. And really, think back to some of the comments that I made earlier, where historically our transportation facilities, whether it be in urban areas or not, have been largely designed around the auto mode, and frankly not very friendly to other modes of transportation, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists, which tend to be the more vulnerable users of the transportation system. We're seeing a really big shift in trying to find ways to modify our street designs to make them a lot more friendly and accommodating for transit, for autos as well, but then pedestrians and bicyclists. And so some of the things that we're seeing being done within existing right-of-ways is taking away some travel lanes and giving those lanes to transit, perhaps on a dedicated lane, or in some cases we're removing a lane and widening the shoulder to be able to provide a dedicated, or in some cases even a protected bicycle lane, and then also trying to improve the pedestrian experience for sidewalks, because really a really major factor for getting people to walk and bike on a given facility is their perceived safety. So a big focus of complete streets is trying to make these facilities safer for those other modes of transportation. So this is a really important area. We're doing it a lot in our company, but there's a lot of activity around the country in this area. I think Portland has been a leader in this, but there's a lot of other cities that are actively involved in this complete streets effort. So I'm sure all of you have heard about connected and automated vehicles. Let me first just do some definitions for you. When we talk about connected vehicles, this means technology that connects vehicles either to other vehicles or to the surrounding transportation infrastructure. And as you can imagine, that encompasses a pretty wide range. And so many of the vehicles that are out there on the highway today are connected in one form or another. And in fact, our smartphones are frankly allowing a normal vehicle to become connected by getting more real-time information. So many of you probably use Google or some of your Apple apps or Android apps or Waze or some other app to be able to navigate the highway system, or to navigate your transit system, or to walk or bike around your particular community. So that's really a form of being connected. There's more advanced elements of connected vehicles, which is when vehicles themselves are connected to each other. And I happen to drive a Subaru vehicle that has eyesight technology, so it can actually lock on to the vehicle in front of it and use something that's called adaptive cruise control. So when I'm driving down the highway, I don't have to touch the brake or the accelerator. I just hit a desired speed, and it will automatically adjust the path of the vehicle or the headway among the vehicles around it to maintain that desired speed. And if traffic congestion increases, it'll automatically slow down, again, based on the desired headway. So there's a number of connected vehicles that are out there on the highway system, and these are growing really by leaps and bounds because most of the modern technology is putting some form of that adaptive cruise or safety technology in place. Automated vehicles are really still in the experimental stage, but they're actually being deployed in a number of communities around the country in the test phase. And many of you have probably heard about Google, who's been testing their automated vehicle, their fully autonomous vehicle, for several years now. And as I believe the statistic is, they've logged several million miles driving around urban areas and on the highway. And now we've got Uber and Lyft, which are very invested in testing their fleet of autonomous vehicles. And their ultimate goal is to have 100% autonomous vehicles in their fleet. General Motors, Ford, Mercedes, Audi, the list goes on. Virtually every one of the major manufacturers is out there testing and developing autonomous vehicles. So suffice it to say, at some point in time, we will have a significant portion of our fleet that is fully autonomous in terms of vehicles operating on the roadway. You see in this slide, this also has great implications for moving freight. And there's a couple of companies right now that are testing fully autonomous freight vehicles to be able to maintain very close headways for freight moving down a highway system. So many of these companies are developing really what they're calling a platform for operating autonomous vehicles, and they intend to lend that platform to be able to be applied to transit or shuttles or all sorts of different potential applications. So now just think about this. If you're planning for the future, or if you're someone that's thinking about maintaining or operating your transportation system, this has got some really important implications. As you can imagine, it's going to affect the way we design facilities of the future. It's going to also affect how we design and lay out our land uses, because there's going to be implications for how do these vehicles park and drop off? How do we deliver packages? Probably heard a little bit about Amazon and their focus on trying to use drones to deal with the last mile delivery component. So they may have a fleet of trucks that are delivering packages to within a mile of their ultimate destination, and then they'll ultimately be delivered via a drone. All of these things have major implications in terms of policy implications, how the safety of the system is going to work, and ultimately how we design it. So really exciting time to be part of transportation, helping our communities of the future really think about how they're going to work in this environment of an increasing fleet of autonomous vehicles. And then smart cities. So smart cities is really a wraparound for all of these things that are connected and autonomous, but really going beyond that and thinking about how we can make our cities smarter from a sensor perspective. So many of you have heard about the Internet of Things, IoT, and the explosion of sensor technology. Well, that's working its way very quickly into cities. And so we've got sensors on streets that are able to detect in real time the speed of traffic patterns. They're sensors that are being used to detect noises like gunshots and things like that for crime. There's applications around the environment. So there's sensors that are out there that are able to sense the level of CO2 in the atmosphere, and helping agencies monitor hotspots within their region. LED lighting has a lot of different potential applications around it. And some of those are being used to connect the city via Wi-Fi and to be able to apply video technology. So there's a whole range of aspects around equipping cities to be able to basically gather data in real time and be able to use that data for decision making. And this is where a lot of the big data in transportation ties in, because all of these sensors, all of these devices are gathering just massive amounts of information, and there's a real need to be able to quickly process that and allow agencies to be able to then discern it and use it for making smarter decisions. So some of the stuff that, again, you're already experiencing in the smart city realm, I'll tie it back to the apps that are widely available and used for a variety of different purposes, particularly in the transportation realm for navigating around a transportation system and finding out things like the availability of parking and how to make better decisions around that. So there's just lots of different applications and activity in the smart city arena. And I think this is a whole nother area that could be a career focus for someone that's interested in getting involved in transportation. So now it's time for another poll.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so we have 2 more polls to ask you all. The first one is, what do you find most exciting about the field of transportation? And while you all are answering, I guess I'd be curious to hear, Mark, what you find most exciting about the field of transportation among these options.
Yeah, so I think it evolves around what I was just talking about, these things that are changing so quickly in transportation around connected and autonomous vehicles and smart cities. It's just a very exciting time to be in transportation, because the way people are using our transportation system is changing right before our eyes on a very rapid rate. You know, I didn't even dive too deeply into Lyft and Uber and how much of an impact that's already had in many urban areas and causing all sorts of challenges. And so that, to me, is what gets me most excited, is being able to solve some of those pressing problems around the way transportation is changing so rapidly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it looks like you all sort of shaping communities, I guess, had the most responses, but across all of them, multimodal applications, new technology, and problem solving are all exciting areas of transportation. I have one more before we pass off to Jen, which is, which of these transportation hot topics most interests you? So smart cities, the complete streets, or connected, automated, autonomous vehicles. And while you all are answering, Jen, do you have, I guess, which of these hot topics most interests you?
Yes, I mentioned in the introductions that a lot of work I've been doing recently is around complete streets, so I definitely have to go with that. And it's really exciting, especially in Florida, because we haven't historically been very great at planning for bicyclists and pedestrians, so there's a lot of work to be done here. So it's really neat to see the agencies here starting to shift focus away from simply moving traffic, which definitely has to happen on some of our roads, our major roadways, but focusing on how to improve safety for bicyclists and pedestrians.
Definitely. And it looks like that a lot of people agree with you. Complete streets seems to be the biggest hot topics across those that are listening in. Again, smart cities and connected automated vehicles, definitely super interesting and important parts of transportation. With that, I'll pass it off to you, Jen.
All right, and Mark, if you wouldn't mind switching over.
So I tried to send it to you already, Jen, so I may need Kylie's help.
All right, Jen, you should have it.
Yep, that worked. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit more about the different career opportunities available within the field of transportation, and what comes to mind for most people is engineering. And engineers certainly have a big role to play in the transportation field, but the workforce is much broader than that for a lot of the reasons that Mark was just talking about. And just within Kittleson, we have staff from backgrounds in urban planning, environmental studies, public policy, seeing a lot more IT systems and computer science majors, finance and business, and even marketing and communication. So I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but these days, it seems like nearly any field of study you can find a career in transportation. A big part of the transportation industry is supported by government agencies. So in most cases, states and local governments own and operate their streets, and they're responsible for planning on those streets, for programming funding to carry out those plans, and then making sure that those projects are built according to their standards. And in some agencies, this work is done by agency staff, what we call in-house. Other agencies will use contractors or consultants to do the design and construction of their projects. So in that case, the agency employees are providing more of an oversight and project management role, and the hands-on work is done in the private sector. And within the private sector, there's a lot of different directions you can go, a lot of issues and problems we're asked to solve. So consultants do a lot of work in the research world for Transportation Research Board and other organizations, helping those state and local governments that I mentioned develop the plans and developing projects to carry out those plans. Consultants also help develop policy and provide training for some of that research work that we do. And then we also work for other private clients, developers in particular, helping them plan out their sites. So all this to say, you have a lot of choices ahead of you, whether you end up in the public sector or the private sector, or maybe staying in more of an academic setting and research. It's important to start to think about your next career move as more than just a job. So these are a few questions to start to consider, and we'll go into each of them in a bit more detail through the next series of slides. So first, I want to share some of the key characteristics to be looking for in a potential employer, especially as you're starting out your career. One is an employer that really takes an interest in your growth and development. So as you're interviewing, ask about training programs, if employees are encouraged to participate in professional organizations. Another characteristic is looking for an open environment where you're able to share your thoughts and opinions. So think to yourself, is this a place where you would feel comfortable speaking up in a meeting, or even just jumping into a casual lunchroom conversation? The next one is mentorship. Mentorship can really make or break an experience, especially early on in your career. So look for mid and senior level staff around that you would feel comfortable going to for questions and guidance. And I'll go into more about our mentorship program a little bit later into the presentation. But the last thing here is looking for a place that's going to challenge you, and a company that's going to expose you to a variety of work experiences. Having that wide variety of experiences is a great way to accelerate your professional development, and the more you're exposed to early on, the more likely you're ultimately likely to find the type of work that you're really passionate about. I mentioned I came from an engineering background, and if it wasn't for that mix of work experiences I got in my first year and a half, I probably never would have found that planning work. And we know that compensation is an important consideration in when you're looking for a job. And what this graph is showing you is that entry-level salaries are usually a pretty narrow range, but it's really those, as you go out with years of experience, that those ranges can vary quite a bit. And it's those experiences you have early on that determine what trajectory you go on. So again, really look for that experience early on that's going to challenge you and allow you to grow in your career. And this slide is just a reminder that your total compensation is more than that salary number. So asking about year-end bonuses and profit distribution, insurance packages, time off, all of those things go into the total compensation package and are things that you should be comparing. So now I want to go into a bit more about Kittleson and who we are as a firm, but these slides are really meant to get you thinking more broadly about what to be looking for in different organizations. So at Kittleson, our purpose is to create an environment of lifelong learning, and we do this by supporting staff at conferences and in professional organizations. We host lunchtime presentations on various technical topics, and we continually encourage staff to try new things and look for new opportunities and project types. We aim to advance the profession through research and various trainings we conduct, and by developing young staff through webinars like this and through our internship program. And the last one here is to provide employees with independent success. So what that means is providing our staff the tools they need to grow and succeed here during their career, and also making sure they have the financial means to enjoy life into retirement. In addition to a firm's purpose, the values are the core beliefs and philosophies of the organization, and you'll find values across multiple organizations are not the same, and it doesn't mean that one is right or wrong. It simply just means that they're different. And so one of your objectives in a job search is going to be looking for values in an organization that fit with your own personal beliefs and philosophies. And it's best if you can to assess that through a company's actions, not just the words. So a few questions you could ask to help you understand a company's values is ask why they established a specific department. Ask them to give you an example of a difficult decision they had to make and what the trade-offs involved were and why they ultimately chose what they did. And ask about how they make decisions about hiring staff, reducing staff, or increasing into a new service area. At Kittleson, we value outward focus, which means thinking about others, our clients, our families before ourselves, and also a trust-based environment where we put a lot of trust in our employees and encourage what we call an entrepreneurial spirit. And the last thing is an operating philosophy, and these are really the ways that an organization practices their values. So at Kittleson, we have a one-firm philosophy where we operate as one firm in many locations. So this means our project teams almost always include staff from several offices. We encourage staff exchanges to other offices to help develop relationships with staff across the firm and get exposed to different clients and project types. And we try to make communication between offices as seamless as possible. With the help of technology like video conferencing and cloud storage, we can work pretty seamlessly with staff all across the country, just like Mark, Kylie, and I are doing today. This is just a quick snapshot of where those locations are. Kittleson's not a huge company. We have about 200 employees and are in 13 states. And one of those advantages, like I mentioned, of having offices around the country is that it gives our employees a chance to learn about how different organizations and governments operate. And before we head into some of the specifics about opportunities here, I'll hand it over to Kylie to do another poll question.
Thanks, Jen. This question is, what do you find most intriguing about Kittleson's purpose and values? We have contributions to the profession, lifelong learning, opportunity for independent success, and trust-based environment as our options. Jen, what do you find most intriguing about our values?
I really enjoy the trust-based environment. I think it's allowed me to grow more quickly in my career. I've been given a lot of responsibility and been able to start to manage projects a little bit more quickly because of that trust that we have in each other. So I've really enjoyed that in particular about Kittleson's values.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. It looks like most of you said lifelong learning as something you value, but again, across all of the responses, yeah, great values that I feel that Kittleson has. Cool.
All right. So one of the best ways to learn about Kittleson in any organization really is through the internship program. And I mentioned in the introductions that I had the opportunity to intern with Kittleson as a student, and it was one of the best experiences I had as an undergraduate. It's safe to say I learned more that summer than I did during any of my transportation classes, and ended up quite bored in that next traffic operations class after my internship. Each year we hire about a dozen students, can vary up or down from universities around the country to be part of the internship program. And we hire both undergraduate and graduate students from a variety of majors. So of course, engineering and planning, but also architecture, business, policy, geography. As long as you have a passion for transportation and a willingness and drive to learn, there could be an opportunity here. We like to think of our interns as a class, so there may only be one intern in each office, sometimes two in our larger offices, but we provide weekly opportunities for them to check in with each other and discuss project work and just compare experiences. We also have weekly tech sessions for all the interns and all of our new staff too, all of our full-time staff, and these cover topics ranging from Consulting 101 to some of the latest and greatest in safety analysis, and one of my favorites, which was the history of roundabouts that we do every year. And we try to give our interns, and again, full-time staff as well, a variety of project work. If you're an engineering student, we'll try to get you involved in a planning project, and if you're a planning student, don't be surprised if we have you doing some traffic operations. All of our interns will have multiple check-ins with our CEO, Mark, throughout the summer, and they meet as a group, usually with our CFO, Larry, to learn more about accounting and firm financials. And our goal for the summer is for you to come away with a really good understanding of what it means to be a transportation consultant, both the technical side and more of the business side of things. And one thing that really stood out to me about Kittleson was the mentorship program. Every intern is given a mentor who will help them not only find housing in a potentially new city, but will also help them throughout the summer find project work and really just be that go-to person to answer any questions. As a full-time employee now, I continue to reach out to the mentor I had as an intern to help with my professional development. And I also want to mention that mentorship is not unique to our internship program. All of our full-time staff are also given a mentor that initially serves a very similar role as the intern mentor. They'll help you get settled, make sure you're getting a variety of project work, and make sure you have the tools that you need to learn and grow. And then after about 6 months or a year, you're encouraged to pick a coach. And that can be anyone in the firm who you've developed a good relationship with and trust to give you good guidance as you continue to grow in your career. And that person can change as your goals change. But I think the best part of the internship program, and I think most former interns would agree, is what we call the internship jamboree. I mentioned that we usually have one intern in each office, but for 1 week during the summer, we fly all of our interns to the same office. And the past few years, it's been Portland, and I think we'll be back there this year. And you get to spend the week getting to know each other better, getting to know the staff in another office, and exploring a new city. And it's just a great way to expand your professional network. And it's really just a lot of fun. We do a similar thing with our new staff, our entry-level staff, usually every 2 years. We get the whole cohort together, again, usually in Portland. So you get to meet folks from all across the firm if you haven't had a chance to yet. And it's a mix of learning and fun activities, fun bonding activities. So with that, I'll hand it back to Kylie.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. So we have one last poll here. The question is, what do you think the most valuable takeaway is from an internship / full-time position? And Mark, if you are there, would you mind responding to this question? What do you think the most valuable takeaway is from an internship or full-time position with Kittleson?
Well, I'll speak to the internship, and I'm going to give it, it's a tie for me, which is technical knowledge and building relationships with peers. I think our internship is a really excellent opportunity for both, the technical knowledge, broad range of exposure to transportation and really all aspects. And then picking up on some of the things that Jen was just highlighting, that one firm philosophy, we really go above and beyond to try to create an environment where our interns can connect and build as many relationships with others as possible, which turns out to be a really great opportunity for them to learn and think about how they might advance their career in transportation. Those things definitely extend into the full-time position, but it's really a strong focus of the internship.
Definitely. Well, so it looks like that there is a wide variety. Looks like building relationships with peers, networking with professionals, and technical knowledge seem to have the most responses. So thanks for responding to that. And all right, and now I'm going to share my screen. Can one of you let me know if you can see that?
Yes, you're good.
We can
Great.
see it.
Great. So now I'm going to get into a few project examples that you could be working on as a full-time analyst or as an intern. And I think this just provides a good overview for people interested in transportation, interested in consulting, just the variety of work that you can be doing at Kittleson and just as a consultant and transportation professional. So the first project that I'd like to introduce is the District Mobility Project. District Mobility is a project that we worked on for over a year for Washington, D.C. This project involved analyzing big data and visualizing it to measure mobility and performance in terms of congestion, reliability, and accessibility. And so to understand congestion, we ask what is the level of service for all users, and can the facility, the roadway, support the demand? And for reliability, you're asking, can I consistently get somewhere that I need to go? And then accessibility is, what choices do I have to get to that place? And car ownership in urban cores are rather low, so multimodal access is definitely critical. And in DC alone, over a third of the households don't own a car in a system that is mainly arterials. So some examples of performance measures that we used in this study included travel time index, bus ridership, transit coverage, bicycle comfort, and pedestrian accessibility. And so this project was funded by the District Council, but was driven by DC's DOT or DDOT. And so we worked with DDOT to define multimodal mobility, as well as prioritize management strategies and develop an investment plan. So we're able to communicate these existing conditions and plans to the public. And the final product is a website. www.districtmobility.org, that is used by DDOT and publicly available to learn about mobility throughout the district. So this is something that you can even search, and it's a fun, interactive website to just learn a little bit more about mobility in DC. So this is an example of a research and education project that deals heavily with data analysis and visualization. The next project I'm going to get into is the Aurora Road Diet Feasibility Study. So this project is with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization, which is the metropolitan planning organization for the Kennedy Space Center area in Brevard County, Florida. And so the Space Coast TPO has been advancing complete streets since 2012, and one of the initiatives is to explore complete street opportunities along key roadways in Brevard County. And so they identified Aurora Road as a candidate for resurfacing and sidewalk improvements. But because of these efforts, Kittleson worked with the Space Coast TPO and county to conduct a corridor study along Aurora Road to explore other potential multimodal improvements that can be implemented just beyond the resurfacing and sidewalk projects they were planning to do. And so a road diet is generally described as removing travel lanes from a roadway, utilizing the space for other uses and travel modes. And the reduction of a lane allows the roadway cross-section to be reallocated for other uses, such as bike lanes, pedestrian refuge islands, transit uses, and parking, as you can see in the two renderings we have on the screen. And so the preferred long-term vision involved reducing Aurora Road, which was a 4-lane roadway, to 2 lanes plus an additional 2-way left turn lane. We also added 6-foot bike lanes to the roadway, as well as widened the sidewalk on the south side, and then added a shared use path on the north side. And so the Aurora Road corridor study allowed for an ideal opportunity to engage stakeholder groups in understanding the issues and opportunities along the corridor, as well as soliciting feedback from those groups. And so we actually used virtual reality at stakeholder events to show existing to proposed renderings, which was a really a big deal. I think this was one of the first times that we had introduced VR at a meeting, and it went over very well. People enjoyed it. I was also able to take a look into the VR set, and it was a very cool experience to switch from the existing to the proposed rendering as if you were standing on the roadway yourself. And the last project that I'm going to get into is the Walker Road Improvements Project. This project is located next to the Nike World Campus, and it is our largest construction project to date, which is very exciting for our design group. So this project is located in Beaverton, Oregon, and it is a 2-lane urban arterial, like I said, located next to Nike's World Campus. And it initially involved improvements to a nearby intersection, but eventually the county intends to turn Walker Road into a 5-lane arterial instead of its original 2-lane arterial that is today. So that would be over 9,400 linear feet of road. So this project results in coordination with homeowners and businesses in the area as the county provides capacity to this corridor, which will occur over a period of 10 to 20 years. The project includes tasks from field investigations and public involvement to water resources through all levels of preliminary and final design, and then eventually construction. And this plan set is already over 200 pages at a 75% design level. And a neat tidbit about this project, when I had first heard about it from Tony Roos in our Portland office, he had shared with us that there was actually a new construction home being built right off of Walker Road. You know, that's a hard conversation to have with homeowners when you're looking to expand a roadway. And so what they were expecting to be a very tough conversation for this old woman who was building her new construction, she actually willingly gave up her property to build something different. So it's a funny turnaround for something that could have been heartbreaking and a little sad to just make the process a lot easier on our side. And so with that, we'll take some time and answer some of the questions you all have submitted. Please continue to submit questions through the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. And as I take a look here, we can start, let's see, maybe Jen, if you could answer this question: do all offices get an intern? And how do you decide which offices get interns?
Yeah, so it's all driven by our mentors. So the short answer is no, we don't have an intern in every office every year. And it depends on where there are mentors that are willing to commit to the summer. So our larger offices almost always have an intern, so Portland, Oakland, Orlando, but some of the smaller ones may rotate on and off various years based on who's available to mentor, because we also have to balance with full-time staff mentors as well.
Another question that we have, and maybe this is something that all of us can touch on because it definitely varies for each of us, but what does a day at Kittleson look like in the office? So maybe Mark, you can start with your perspective, and then Jen, you can add yours as well.
Well, I suspect people might be more interested in your days than mine. This is my day. my day involves a lot of meetings with people across the company. I also connect with folks externally. I have some business activities and meetings, connecting with some of our outside advisors. So, yeah, I would say 80% of my day tends to involve meeting with people on various topics. It can be new candidates that we're talking about bringing onto the firm, or new business opportunities for the firm, or internal operations. So, wide variety of activities, but not very much technical work these days. Mostly talking with various people around the company.
Yeah, so I can share my experience. So not quite as many meetings. I still do a lot of technical work. So my days consist of some independent analysis, maybe some report writing to summarize those results, and a fair amount of meetings still, project meetings mostly. But I also want to take this opportunity to touch on some of the flexibility we have in working, and so wanted to share a quick anecdote about my day today even. I had an inspector coming to the house this morning, so worked an hour from home in the morning, took care of what I needed to in the house, got to work about 11, worked a partial day there, and then came home to do this webinar. So every day is different from a technical perspective and what projects you're working on, but Kittleson also offers a lot of flexibility to integrate those essential life things into your work week.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just echo what Jen says. I guess as far as looking back on, let's say yesterday for me, I think I worked on a single project, and a lot of times I vary between 2 to 4 projects a day. So working on a single project all day because I had a deliverable due was definitely a little different than what I typically do. But I'd say the day definitely varies based on project work, and then again, like the flexibility side of it is also very nice. So like working today from home to present this webinar tonight, I guess I'd say, is something that I have the flexibility to do. But yeah, I'd say, and then also varies by office as well. You have anywhere, I mean, the Portland office is our largest office, and I am not sure if we're up to like 65 or so people. Maybe Mark, you can correct me there. But a lot of the other offices vary anywhere between 2 people and or 1 person and like maybe 30, 35, 40 people. So it definitely depends on the office location you're in. For Reston, we have about 9 people in our office. So my day definitely looks different than if I were to be spending a day in Portland, where there's a lot more going on. Let's see here. Another question, looks like a few people have asked this. What exactly are you looking for in an internship application? What would be key standout points or qualities? Jen, would you want to answer this?
Sure. So I mentioned briefly in the presentation, but I'd say that passion for transportation and the willingness to learn are the key things. We know every program and university is different. So if you have transportation classes available to you and you're able to take them, that's of course great. But we know not everyone has that at their school. So it's not a requirement, just an added bonus. And same with some of the software skills as well. We expect to teach you everything you need to know on the job, so don't need to worry about coming in as an expert in AutoCAD, but if you have that experience from classes and other internships, definitely a bonus. But I'd say we look at the internship level and even at the entry level more for those softer skills, your ability to communicate, your critical thinking skills, your leadership style, those types of things.
Definitely. Let's see. Maybe this is a question that Mark can start off answering. How do you determine which projects to pursue? Is it based off of current employee expertise, past client requests, some other factors? Could you get into a little bit of detail about that?
Yeah, it's a variety. First, just a little bit of how it all works, how we go about creating projects. This ties into the one firm concept that Jen was describing earlier. But whenever we open a new lead or create a proposal or project opportunity, we share that information with the firm, so everybody has an opportunity to express interest in it and let the project manager know or the project leader know that they'd like to be involved. When forming project teams and developing it, obviously, there's a certain amount of specific expertise that we're oftentimes looking for. But many of our projects lend themselves to an entry-level candidate getting involved and just learning on the job. Big part of what we do is on-the-job training and on-the-job learning. And so there's almost always an opportunity to get someone involved that does not have any previous experience, and we use it as a teaching and learning opportunity. But obviously, we need to have certain expertise on some project applications or many of our project applications. So we're typically forming teams that will involve a project manager at a minimum, a principal in charge, which would be a senior level staff member that is there for support, quality control, and really any kind of assistance that the project manager and team might need. And then depending on the size or scope of the project, you may have specific technical specialists and then some entry-level analysts that get involved in really all aspects. And so that's every project's a little bit different, but that's in general how we go about forming teams.
Thanks, Mark. This question is for Jennifer. This person asked, why did you prefer a private firm over a public sector position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really enjoyed the pace of the private sector. I found it to be a little bit more of a faster pace, a little more challenging, a little more dynamic. So in my limited experience at BDOT, admittedly, I was doing, actually, they managed a lot of consultants. And I found that the consultants were doing the real fun work, the real analysis, and I was in public-private partnership. So I wanted to learn more about the business and financial side of things, and I found that the agency staff weren't really getting into the weeds of that. They were doing more management of that. So I wanted to get my hands a little dirty and just wanted that faster paced environment. So ended up choosing the private sector.
Another question, maybe I'll bounce this one over to Mark, but we can all touch on it. Do you normally work on projects located in the area near your office? So I guess how local versus non-local is our work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for the majority of staff, it's probably somewhere around 70 to 80% are within their region, and we define local by region. So we're set up with 4 different regions around the country. So we have the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, which includes offices like Boston, DC, Reston, Baltimore. We have the Florida region where Jen is located, and we've got Tallahassee, Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, all part of that region. And so when I say local, I really mean a region, because we're trying to operate just like we're one firm, a single office in many locations. We're trying to apply that same overlay regionally so that staff really share resources seamlessly across the region. And then out in the West, we've got the Northwest is a region, and then California, Arizona is a separate region as well. So in general, probably 80 to 90% can be within that region, and then that other 10 to 20 as a general rule, are supporting other offices around the firm. But that can vary quite a bit. We do have some highly specialized technical resources on the data analytics side, or on the research or traffic operations or modeling or roundabouts. And so some of those technical specialists tend to spend a great deal of their time supporting other offices. And then, of course, some of our small offices early on in their career, a young professional might be working maybe only 30 or 40% within projects within a local office, and the rest of their time supporting the rest of the region or as a firm. So it can really vary, but as a general rule, somewhere around 80 to 90% probably located within the region. But this would be a great opportunity for Jen and you, Kylie, to let me know how your own experience might differ from that.
Yeah, I can jump in, Kylie, because mine has changed a little bit, even just the 4 years that I've been here. So I started in Orlando, which is a larger office, and I would say 90% of my work was in the Florida region. I found that I still had those connections from my internship, which happened to be in the Northeast. So I've almost always had a project with those folks going on from the get-go, which has been really great to maintain those relationships. And then when I moved to Tampa, it was a new office. So now all of a sudden, almost none of my work, as Mark mentioned, was in the very local market, the Tampa market. And it's been really great to see that grow over the years as we've started to develop our presence in Tampa and grow our client base there. And now I'm probably at about that 70 to 80% within the region, but now getting, probably closer to 50% close to home in Tampa, which has been really exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. I guess my workload is probably pretty similar to 80% being within the region, 20%, maybe even 15% being outside of the Northeast region for me. I mean, I've worked on projects that within the region, for the Northeast, it's anywhere between North Carolina and Boston. So still a very wide geographical range. A lot of my projects are focused within the Reston, DC, Baltimore area. I've done a good bit of work recently with Pennsylvania. We have a Philadelphia office, and then just some, I guess, connections that we've had for a few years with PennDOT. Have worked on some projects up there. I'm currently working on a project in Boston, and then I've also had some opportunities to work on some development services, private development work in Eastern Oregon through the Portland office. And I really enjoy having, I guess, communicating across offices in that way. When it feels like I am working a little too much within my region, I'll send an email over to 2 or 3 of the folks in Portland that I've worked with before, and sort of express interest in just another project that gets me out of my region. And then I also just worked on my first, I guess, Florida project a few weeks ago, which was cool. I haven't broken into any project work there in my 2 years yet, and was just talking to Justin Jansen, who is in our Reston office today, and seems like there's definitely project work available in Florida for me to continue working on. So, and I'm sure that'll vary as the seasons go by of how much work I'm doing that's local versus non-local. Mark, I guess this would be a good question for you. A vision for Kittleson. Do you plan to grow the company or keep this size, and why?
That's a great question. So as a company, we've never set out strategic growth targets per se. You probably have noticed we're in some pretty interesting locations around the country, and it might be hard to connect all the dots and how we got from one point to another. it's really based on being open to opportunities and connecting with people. Every single one of our office locations is a result of a relationship with an individual. They may be internal to the firm, someone that wanted to help open a new office for us, or it could be someone that we've connected with externally over time. So as to whether we'll continue to grow, my perspective is the answer is yes. We have been growing historically somewhere around that 5 to 10% per year rate. We do it in a very measured way, one person at a time. So anybody that approaches us, we really want to make sure that there's a good, strong fit between us and them. And so this tends to temper a little bit our growth rate, but we're always open to new opportunities. We're a very entrepreneurial company. Part of being a learning organization is we want to challenge ourselves. We enjoy being in new markets. We enjoy solving new problems. We enjoy taking on new challenges. And so all of this tends to lead to growth. But it's not growth for growth's sake. It goes back to the mission of the organization and trying to be able to create that environment of lifelong learning and advancing our profession and developing communities. And so my guess is we'll continue to grow at about the same rate. Obviously, this is going to be up to Brandon Nevers, the incoming CEO, to decide. But knowing Brandon, he's very much bought into our values and culture. So I suspect we're going to see more of the same. I will mention though that our growth historically, unlike a lot that's occurring in the AE industry, tends to be growth through acquisition, buying other companies. Again, that tends to be driven towards some strategic growth objectives. We would rather do it organically, one person at a time. And a lot of our growth has come from hiring folks just like yourselves right out of school and starting their careers. And we have a very high percentage of our staff, in fact, that have been with us their entire career. And that's really our most common way to grow is hiring people right at the entry level. That said, though, we do hire people at the mid-level, and we have had some very targeted acquisitions that have come through long-term relationships with other small firms, but that's really not our model for growth.
Thanks, Mark. I think following up with that, a good question would be for someone that's considering both going into the transportation industry or going to grad school, I guess like a master's program, what advice would you offer when making that decision?
Well, I'll give you my personal experience and I guess a personal preference, and that is I really think starting your career and spending a couple of years with an organization or in the transportation industry is really helpful to help guide the decision as to which graduate program to go into and maybe what area you want to specialize in. I'm of the belief that, and this is really instilled in me by Wayne Kittleson, our founder, is if you're going to go to a graduate program, go to the very best in the country for what it is you're interested in. And the reality of it is that each graduate program has a little bit of a different focus and specialty, and it tends to change from time to time. And for most of us, coming right out of school as an undergrad, we really don't have a great idea of where we want to focus or what we might want to specialize in. And so we tend to pick graduate programs that are a little bit more out of convenience, or maybe the opportunity has been presented to us. So I have a personal bias towards spending a little bit of time working before going to graduate school. That said, there's no wrong answer here, and for many folks, they may know exactly where they want to go and may have a desired focus right out of the bat and would like to go to graduate school right away, and that certainly can work. We have many examples of staff that have done it both ways within our firm. Folks that started with us and then went back, and a number of folks that we've hired right out of graduate programs. So there's really no right or wrong here, but I think for folks that are contemplating it, I would encourage you to at least think about getting a little bit of experience under your belt before making that decision to go to graduate school, because I think it can help you both with finding the right graduate program and then frankly getting the most out of that graduate program once you're there.
Great. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Just personally, I had thought that it would be a possibility for me to go to grad school after a few years of working. And I can just say from my own experience that I've been learning so much in the industry working at Kittleson that really, like if I had decided exactly what I wanted to get into and hopped into a program, I think I feel like I'm learning so much here just in the industry that I definitely feel like I might be missing out on some of that working or going back to grad school. But with that said, it's still a desire of mine. I think it's more of a longer term desire than it is a shorter term, because frankly, I don't see a point with 2 years under my belt at Kittleson where I feel like I need to go back and become more specialized, more than what I can do already here at Kittleson. Another question that I have for Jen, how do you suggest I stay involved and learn about transportation if my program doesn't offer transportation-specific courses?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can stay engaged. One is to take courses that are on the periphery of transportation, and that includes a lot of things now. So you may have urban planning classes you can take. A lot of folks come from geography backgrounds, and a lot now in computer science can be really applicable to the work that we do. So just because it doesn't have transportation in the title doesn't mean it can't be really beneficial to what we're doing in the industry. There's also, with the internet, there's so many blogs that are putting out really great information that you can keep up with. We have one that you can subscribe to. I'll put in a shameless plug there. And then professional organizations. It may not be at your school, maybe in the city that you live. There are chapters of professional organizations, and you can join and go to meetings there. And I guess one more thing is just talk to folks in the industry, reach out to people from a variety of backgrounds, maybe local consulting firms, local agencies, and just do some job shadows and learn about their day-to-day experiences and how it's different across all the different opportunities in transportation.
Yeah, definitely. I guess another question for you, Jen, about interns. Can interns get involved with research, and what other opportunities do they have?
Yeah, it's a bit more challenging, I'll say, but certainly not impossible. And it's really just the timing of the project. So we have tried in the past to pair interns with specific research projects, and that doesn't always go so well as schedules ebb and flow. But if you're willing to try out anything, chances are there'll be a research project going on in the summer, and we can look for ways to get you plugged into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also goes along with pairing the mentor to the intern. Like if that's something that you're interested in, we can do our best to find a mentor that would fit that interest or has worked on a research project or two, or maybe even be able to work with them on a research project. And I guess a lot of times research projects are longer range, kind of go anywhere from a year to a few years. So unfortunately, interns don't get that, I guess, that full experience and see the life of the project. However, yeah, like Jen said, it's definitely possible to get plugged in into some research tasks or a project. Maybe this is a question for Mark to take a stab at. Does Kittleson partake in any international projects?
So from time to time, yes. We look at opportunities internationally, but we tend to have more international exchanges. The challenge that we find is really just kind of making the economics work on a given project. But we have participated, and international opportunities come our way a fair bit. It's just a little bit more challenging to be able to make the opportunity fit. But that said, it's something that we're always open to and interested in exploring those opportunities. And it's been some time ago now, but 6-7 years ago, we had an office in Australia, in Brisbane, and so that's something that I suspect will be in our future again. We didn't find the right recipe to make it work, being halfway across the world, but we enjoyed the several years that we were there. We learned a lot from that process, and I suspect there will come a time in our future when we have another international office. We do have an individual working internationally, someone that's actually over in Denmark that works remotely for us, and we have, I think, more than 17 countries represented in our firm. So we have a very strong international flavor and international diversity in our workforce. And so, yeah, something that we're definitely open to, but it doesn't tend to materialize itself on a very regular basis. Now, that said, North America is a little bit of an exception. We do quite a bit of work up in Canada and Mexico. So I should probably include that. Just outside of the North American continent, it's fairly limited at this point.
Thanks, Mark. I guess this question, maybe Mark can touch on, and then Jen can as well, but about travel. Do employees travel much or at all? If so, how does that conversation get started?
So, yeah, I'll start, and then Jen can kind of give a little more personal experience. So employees in our firm, I think in consulting in general, should be expected to travel a bit, but in our firm, probably more than most. That said, for the average staff member, it's not an overwhelming amount of travel. But being willing to go work from another office, we tend to do a lot of our work remotely, but oftentimes there's value in seeing the site that you might be working on, or the project area. Oftentimes it's important to go for meetings. And then, as Jen mentioned earlier, we'll do just staff exchanges just for experience, particularly early in someone's career. We'll try to send a young professional to go work in another office somewhere in a different part of the country that they haven't been exposed to, really more for their development and helping to build more firm relationships. And then again, for some of those technical specialists, they may be traveling a bit more because they're supporting projects around the country. And I myself, I travel quite a bit, just as the nature of my job. But I think everybody should expect to have some travel as part of their experiences if they were working with us.
Yeah, and I can share my personal experience. I will say, since moving to Tampa, as I mentioned, a smaller office, I'm definitely traveling more now than I did before. I'm still getting to Orlando quite a bit. I'll actually be there on Thursday this week. So probably every couple of months for various project meetings, I'm over there. I also made it out to Portland twice this year, once for the intern jamboree that I was helping lead, and then also for, I was on a benefits task force. We were reviewing benefits throughout the firm, making some recommendations. So we all got together in Portland. And also made it up to Boston this year for some project work. So some of those things are what I would call more extracurriculars that I volunteered myself for, and travel comes with that, and some of it's project work where it's, I wouldn't say required, but strongly encouraged that I make those trips out to be with the team locally occasionally.
Yeah, and I've also had, I guess in the last 2 years, I've made a couple trips to Portland, 2 trips to Boston, and I guess Boston is sort of close by, so it's just a short flight away. And then within the Mid-Atlantic, Baltimore and DC are just a short drive away. So I've also been in those offices pretty frequently, hoping to make a visit down to some of the North Carolina offices soon, and maybe Florida as well. But it's definitely something that I mean, I've gone for the SL1 Summit, the sort of similar to the intern jamboree. I've also gone for project work, so really depends on the reason to travel, but it's definitely an option. And we are just about out of time. I guess before we wrap up, Jen or Mark, do you all have any closing remarks to say?
Well, this is Mark. I'll start just by first thanking you, Jen, and Kylie for spending a very late evening with us. So you're on East Coast time, so I really appreciate you staying up to share some of your perspectives with our group today. And then thank you all for participating and taking some time to learn a little bit more about transportation and our firm, and also for investing the time and energy and just exploring career opportunities in transportation in general. So really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best of luck. I will share that if you're interested in learning a little bit more about us, obviously got a website that we've invested a lot in, some good material on there. You can also find some information about us on Glassdoor and LinkedIn. So a couple of other places that you can find us out there in the social media realm. But thanks again for your participation.
Yeah, and I just add thanks for staying engaged in the polls and asking really thoughtful questions. Really enjoyed hearing from you all, and hope to hear from you soon.
Great. Yeah, when I sent you all the link to today's webinar, I also sent you my contact information. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions after today. And if you'd like to express interest in an internship or full-time position, we encourage you to do so by visiting the career section of our website. So again, thank you all for joining today. Hope you have a great evening.